Today's lesson is on writing a rule or an equation. And this is similar to what we did on Friday when we filled in the table based on the interior angles of polygons and the interior angle measure of a polygon depending on the number of sides that polygon has. So the example that I have here says, tickets to the Big E are $21 per person. What simple rule can be used to find the cost when given a certain number of people who want to attend? Now, the first thing we want to figure out is where are our variables? And our variables in this statement are obviously the cost and the number of people who want to attend. The second thing that's important to us is this $21 per person. That's kind of the set price, and that's something that we can use to elaborate on our rule. A rule is usually equivalent to an equation. When they refer to something as writing a rule, they're asking you to write an equation. And how are we writing an equation? We're including the variables that we usually include in a coordinate graph, which is x, comma, y. Now, when x is our independent variable and y is our dependent variable, that means that whatever our equation is, x is going to be somewhere inside the equation. Something's going to happen to x, and the equation is going to equal our y value because y is dependent on what is happening to the x, right? In order to find our rule is to identify which variable is our x variable and which is our y variable. So in this case, I think our x variable, so what is independent is the number of people who want to go to the Big E. And then our y variable is going to be the cost. How much is it going to cost to send these people? So cost is y, and our number of people is x. So as we go, we can kind of do some examples to figure out what pattern is existing in the data. So if I have 0 people who want to go to the Big E with me, how much is it going to cost me? Well, it's $21 per person. So if I don't have anyone going, it's going to be $0 so far. If I have one person going with me to the Big E at $21 per person, the cost is going to be $21. If I had 2 people going with me, the cost would be $21 per person, or a total of $42. And we can continue to fill in the table that way just by increasing the number of people, which is our x variable, by 1, and then changing the cost based on the number of people, right? What is the actual cost? Because the problem tells us that it's $21 per person. So I can do a couple of sets here. 84. That's about enough. So when you take a look at the number of people and the cost, what you want to do is figure out what is happening to the x variable in order to reach the y variable, right? So x comes first, and what's going on? What could I do to these values to make them equal the y value, or the y variable? And one of the main things that you can look at is the fact that the problem says it's $21 per person, right? And that's how we built the table. But mathematically speaking is what we're talking about. We want to know what's happening to the x in order to equal the y. So at this point, nothing's happening to the x variable, right? 0 is equal to 0. That's it. With our 1, if I take the number 1, I can reach the number 21 a few different ways. I can add 20, or I can multiply by 21, right? That's the way that I'm reaching $21. These are 2 options here. I can add 20 to 1, or I can multiply by 21. With number 2, my options are I can add 40 to 2, or I can also get $42 by multiplying 2 by 21. And as we go on, we're going to kind of start to notice a little bit of a pattern. So if I have 3 people coming, in order to get from 3 to 63, I can add 60, or I can multiply by 21. And these are kind of the things that you want to look for when it's asking you to write a rule, because basically the rule for this equation is going to be whatever operation is consistently giving you the right y value. So in this case, depending on my x, whatever my x value is, if I multiply that value by 21, and I can write that as 21x, that's what that means, 21 times x, or I can put a little asterisk in there to separate it, I'm solving for my y value. So if my number of people x is 3 and I multiply by 21, I'm getting my cost, which is y, and that's $63. So in this case, the rule wasn't very complicated, but it turned out as 21 times x equals y. That's our final rule. That's the final answer that we're looking for, really. Okay, so the key to finding the rule to a data set or writing an equation is identifying both variables. Which variable is independent? That goes inside the equation. Which variable is dependent? That's what the equation is going to be equal to. And what is happening to the x value to get us to the y value? What kind of operations can we use to reach that response? Now, there aren't many written notes for these for this example. However, I would like to make sure that you have the steps of how to write a rule for a data set or the equation, in addition to a few notes or questions on how this could get a little more complicated.